Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to allow a couple of seconds to go by as we allow all of our participants to come into the session today. Hi, my name is Noemi Guevara, and it's my pleasure as a Director of Alumni Engagement to welcome you to this edition of our 49er Industry Chat. Before we start, we would like to inform you this session is being recorded and will be available on demand on our website at csulb.edu/alumni. We also encourage you to use our Q&A box to submit questions for our guest speaker for today. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Xiomara Hernandez is a human resource analyst at OC Fair and Event Center. She earned her BA in psychology in 2015, and during this time, she invested her time in developing her psychology research skills. However, this path wasn't fulfilling, and she carved a new path in the field of human resources. Her 3 promotions have been at the OC Fair and Event Center, where she gets to work on training and development, employee relations, job analysis, and many other projects that require communication, emotional intelligence, and patience. In addition to being a full-time employee, she's also a part-time student of CSULB's Master's in Business Administration program. Hosting today's industry chat, please welcome Xiomara Hernandez. Thank you, Xiomara, for joining us today.
Yeah, well, no, thank you. I'm happy to be part of this.
Great, and I'm very excited to have this chat with you and share your insights with our alumni and students on the call. To kick it off today, I think it's only fair that we start with your path through Long Beach. What was that like? What made you choose Long Beach, and your experience in the psychology department?
Yeah, so perhaps like some students maybe that are on this call, I was first generation. So a big thing that has helped me be successful is like finding people who I can ask questions to. So when I landed at Cal State Long Beach, I found the TRIO program, which I believe is like a federally funded program. And that was a big help to make sure that I was on track to graduate. And then I learned from a mentor that I had, because I did this internship right before starting at Long Beach. She had told me that in addition to going to school, I needed to get experience. And so I don't remember how, but I networked my way into being connected to a chief of vascular surgery at the VA, which was walking distance from Long Beach because it's right next door. And then I was also a research assistant for 2 different professors in the psych department. And I also did the psychology honors program. Like I applied and I got in. And so there was a year, which was junior year at Cal State Long Beach, that I was on paper everything I'd wanted to be. I got straight A's. I was in honors. My research proposal won. I was, working for 2 professors and at the VA. But that summer I was crying every day because I just wasn't happy. And that's what I mean when I wrote in the intro that I wasn't fulfilled. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the disciplines. Like there are people where their heart is in research. But for me, that wasn't the case. And I wanted to listen to my heart. And so I talked to my professor who was mentoring me for the psych honors program. And she gave me the advice that I needed to make the decision where my heart and my mind aligned. And my heart and my mind aligned by saying, hey, I want to switch paths. I don't think research or, becoming a psychologist is for me. I thought it was, and I was wrong, and it's okay. And so then that's how I went to the CDC. What is the Career Development Center?
Development Center.
Yeah, I went to the Career Development Center. Gosh, Long Beach has been such a theme in my life, I'm seeing. And I by the time I went to the building, I had already Googled what else I could do with my degree. And so HR was something that popped up. And so I wanted to pivot and try that with the promise that if I try it and I don't like it, I will try something else. Like I want to make sure I find work that I find meaning in, that I'm happy, that I'm fulfilled. There was something else I wanted to say, but it slipped my mind. So that's kind of my psych undergrad path at Cal State Long Beach.
Great. I want to touch about you being participant of Trio and kind of finding your community. Like, how did that shape you into finding like a mentor or a sponsor that guided you into finding these research opportunities, and during those opportunities, like, did you enjoy those, or at that point you were like, psych might not be for me when you were in those roles?
Yeah, so Trio was helpful because I basically went to college because that's what my parents expected of me. It wasn't like, yeah, I was truly doing it to please my parents. Now, did I enjoy going to school? Average, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, I love this. But looking back, it's because I had low esteem, right? I had low feelings of self-worth. And so I just felt that school was here and I was here and so I did what a lot of people do. You pretend to fit in. And at Trio, I felt very comfortable to say, hey, I'm scared. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And I don't feel comfortable in the traditional counselor setting because like your counselors change. So for me, having the same counselor who knew me by my name, who just that relationship, having that solid rapport helped me feel like I can do this. I can finish this degree. And then I started to feel like, oh wow, like I can do this college thing. I can perform well in class. Lo and behold, if you study, you can get a good grade, right? These were habits I didn't have in high school. And really talking to my professors during office hours, I think that's how like the building, relationships really started for me. I don't remember how I made the VA connection. I really can't for the life of me. But yeah, it really helped me because when you go from classroom learning and you teach yourself, okay, I can study and I can do this task, but then you merge that with going out into the real world, doing tasks for people where they're counting on you in that minute. Those two things together started to build my confidence.
Great. And we started to get some questions in. So even though you change fields, do you still use the skills you learned in your psychology courses today?
I love that question. Yes, the skills did transfer. And I do want to say, like, you may think when you look at your resume, if you want to pivot or you want to change, like, oh, this won't transfer, but you'd be surprised. If you can just tell the right story in an interview, you can explain how those skills transfer. With research, for example, I was very detail oriented and I organized like their stock room, which we use for medical trials. So that was one of the stories that stood out to the person that hired me for my current role. Because in HR, you have to be organized, deadlines and rules are important. So yeah, these things can transfer, and attention to detail is so crucial because with some of the work I do, I don't know if it's going to end up in court. So I need to make sure that it's I've crossed my T's and dotted my I's, I believe is the expression.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. When you knew you wanted to switch directions and started, like you said, to research new options, what were you looking for and how do you define a fulfilling career?
Wow. Okay. So that's a great question as well. Um, it's one of those things that it's kind of like I know it when I feel it. However, there were themes that I was looking for. So I don't know if you guys have heard of ONET. It's like the occupational. Let me see if I can link it right now. I'll take a quick second because it's one of those things I think a lot of people don't necessarily know, but it's a great tool. Again, I think it might be like federally funded or something like that. So a lot of these things that the government invests in, I do like them. I have a heart for it. So there you can Google, or sorry, not Google, you can put in the search bar whatever job you want to know more about. And sometimes if the job is too niche, it might be clustered into a bigger group, but it gives you everything: tasks, knowledge, skills, and abilities. What type of education level should you have? What kind of income can you expect depending on the state that you're in? So when I'm reading these duties, let's just say I was to read in engineering, I was to look up civil engineering on ONET. By looking at the duties, I'm pretty sure very quickly I'd be like, this is not for me. Why? Because I did do CAD in high school. I don't want to be working with CAD, for example. And if you don't know what any of those terms are, you can go to YouTube, you can go to Google. That's what's been so great about the internet, is it's like, it's really opened up the possibility of you being able to ask questions without even knowing someone. You just, the internet makes that accessible for you. But fulfillment for me, I didn't know it when I was graduating college, but I know it now. And it's centered around community work. I need my work to impact the community. And I'm not like, to use kind of one of those online phrases, I'm not a gunner for like, I want to be making the best salary possible and I don't care how I got there. I've learned that's not me. And if that's you, that's okay. My husband, not to name drop, but my husband did go to Harvard. And so he does have the friends that are the gunners and they're happy, you know? And so I think that's what I've realized. It's like, just be happy. Don't compare with what makes you happy versus what makes the Ivy League student happy. Look out for yourself, you know? And so community work is what I get to do at the OC Fair and Event Center. We have a farm that's, you know, for free for the public. So we do ag education. We also have a museum for vets. So there's a lot that we do. And we have other programs like the fair will open early for special needs people. So I basically want to work for a company that has a heart, and I know, therefore, I'm not an Amazonian.
Yeah,
So,
that's true. Just finding what, touches your heart, because you're going to do it, every day. So now you graduated, you're looking for your first job and you land at the OC Fair and Events. What was that transition like? And then as we could see, you were able to move up so quickly. Did you know there were growth opportunities since you started? Walk us through that.
Yeah. So one thing about getting into HR in the OC Fair and Event Center is that I had to do a trade-off. And so in business school, they definitely talk about trade-offs. If you have a vision, like what are you going to give up maybe, because you can't have it all. And for me, what that came down to was, oh, it looks like no one wants to hire me in HR full time because I don't, pardon me, I don't have all of the skills, right, for them to pay me that, benefits and all of that. But people looking for a temporary HR employee might want me. They might take a chance. And so that's where it was a perfect marriage at the OC Fair and Event Center. So I had a second job. But one tip for those of you that, trying to think of how to say it, but in my experience, I have found that when you do the job the best that you can for the money that you agreed to, people are going to notice your work ethic. So if I don't mind sharing what I made. So I took this job for $12 an hour. I did negotiate that, by the way. They were offering $9. And I said, well,
Yeah.
I'd like to get the top of the range if possible. And here's why I think I'm qualified for that.
Your self-worth.
But I worked at the mall making $20 an hour. So it's not that I went to the fair giving them $12 an hour CO, and then I went to the mall giving them $20 an hour CO. No, both companies got the same CO. And so that is a tip that I recommend, because you never know who's watching. You never know what it could lead to. You're signing up for a temp job. They tell you, the odds of you getting full-time work here is 1 in a million. And yet I got it, it happened. Executives had to vote for my role to be created. It didn't exist at the time. But the fact that, for example, they knew my work ethic even to the executive level. And that's something that I like about working for a middle to, it's small, but technically we meet the mid-size company definition. You don't feel like you're just a cog in the machine. I really feel like at my workplace, I can have influence because they know who CO is, and I can build a reputation. Now, that's not to say it's impossible the bigger you go. I'm just saying, like, this is what I have found works for me, and I'm a happy fish in the pond that I'm in.
Yeah, and do you have any advice for our listeners? I think sometimes key is like who you build relationships with in the workplace, and for them to see your skills and see that they see something in you and say, like, we could see her moving up. Do you have any advice for people on what they could do to develop good habits, or any skills that could be transferable in the future?
Yes, so I will go ahead and try to share my PowerPoint if that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Oh, it's not detecting. Let me see if it detects it now that I clicked on it. Huh. Am I able to share? Let me
Yeah.
just do that. Okay.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Mm. It looks like because of the recording, it's giving me trouble. Do you mind sharing it?
Yeah, we will pull it up right now. But while we do that, can you share what does an HR analyst do?
Yes. So when you're an analyst, a lot of the work is more project based. And so what that means is that if you think of like what an HR person would have done in like the 60s or 70s, you'd push paper is kind of what the term that they use, right? You're putting signatures, double checking forms. But then as an analyst, like for example, analysis is something that I do, which is like an in-depth job study. So you don't just it's like there's this path that leads to the job description that you see. So we look at tasks, knowledge, skills, abilities. There's like a rating phase to it to make sure that it comes across as important for someone to have when they start the job. But then other things I do are working on cases. So employee relations is a big part of the higher you move up in HR for those of you that are interested. And so you're documenting conversations, you're documenting why decisions were made. And then because we work with union employees, there's a whole process on how you, for example, would do a write-up or how you would uh, quote terminate someone. There's a whole path for that. So there's a lot of looking up information as well. There's a lot to that, but I kind of like it. So yeah.
How did
Um,
you learn like all those skills? I know there's like, is there trainings for that your company provide that training for you?
Yeah, so that's definitely part of it because Cal HR, which is I like to call it like Papa HR because it's based in Sacramento, right? It's what ties back to the governor's office, so to say. That is, they do a lot of trainings, and prior to COVID, I did get flown out for work, which I like to. I realize I like it, like time to time. It makes me feel special. I'm not gonna lie, it feels like a treat. But then
Yes.
now they have some virtual trainings, and then my boss did an excellent job of keeping manuals. So if you guys
Mhm.
go into very technical roles, like if you're creative, it's probably hard to come up with a manual for how you came up with a marketing campaign. But if your role is more technical, say perhaps engineering, or if you become an attorney or something like that, maybe it's possible to put a manual together and have tabs and highlight and things like that. So there's a lot of that as well, where I go into my boss's bookshelf and I pull out the thing that I'm looking for. And then trade publications is another big piece. So luckily my job pays for me to be subscribed to SHRM, which is a Society of Human Resources Management. And I'm subscribed to their newsletters. And so I love reading that, staying up to date. And that's a way of like informal training that's built into my monthly, if not weekly habits.
Yeah, that personal development, is definitely key. So you could stay up to date in your industry. Even though it's not paid, you sometimes have to do it on your own.
Yes. So this slide that's up right now is something I talked about when I was interviewed at the OC Fair for the very first time. And so it led to kind of how I got my job and that my rate was justified for those extra $3 I was asking for. So I did want to share it because in my experience, we hire, for example, a ton of seasonal employees at the OC Fair and Event Center, like over 1,000 each year. And so I have noticed a trend in my workplace where sometimes employees aren't as engaged. And my theory is perhaps because it's a temporary gig, especially if you're hired just for the fair, you're thinking, I'm only here 23 days, whatever.
Mhm.
And so it has a click feature. So I want you guys in this first box, it says, imagine that you're on a crew, you're part of a crew team, right? And so you're on this boat, and I believe it has, let's just say like 10 individuals there. And then if you click it, 3 of them are busting their butts. So what does that look like? That means that they're actually using, you know, the lever, or what is this called? I don't remember what this is called.
Paddle.
You're using the paddle. Thank you. You're using the paddle actively to get the boat to go forward. And then click the next one. And you have 5 that are looking at the scenery. So granted, they aren't paddling. They're kind of resting a little bit on their laurels. And then you have the last 2, which do have the paddle, but they either, for example, in the interview, I said they're going backwards, right? So that instead of using the energy so that it moves forward, they're actually holding the company back. But in this case, you could say maybe they're drilling a hole so that water comes in. I have seen all 3 types of employees, especially because I work in HR. And I knew my values then, that I am an employee who wants to be actively engaged, and I hold myself to that. If I felt that my heart was no longer in it, I would look for another job, because I think I owe the company that. You know, I really do see it as a two-way street where the company is providing a salary, they're providing benefits, but in exchange, I'm showing up for them and I'm doing the best that I can do every day. And if somewhere that marriage was no longer harmonious, if you will, then something's got to give, right? And that's where you see terminations, or that's where you see people saying, you know what, thank you so much, I'm moving on.
Yeah, that's where you realize you might not be a right fit for what you're going for.
Yeah, and so you can see that the engaged group doesn't make up majority of the workforce. And there's actually interesting data too, if you were to look at it, that I think they say something like 20% of the employees at a workplace do most of what makes that company successful. And so if you can set yourself up and stick to your values of being an engaged employee, you're setting yourself up for success, because to me, my most precious resource is my reputation. If I lost that, I don't need, I would have to start over somewhere else. I feel like it's really important for me to be a reliable employee. And yes, that obviously comes with promotions, because I have had a few. But it also gives me the confidence to do my job, do it well, and stay marketable. So that's something else that I know we haven't talked about yet, but something that I was taught when I was 18, because like I mentioned, I did an internship program, is that every year, for example, and I copied her. So my mentor does this every year. She asks herself 2 questions. She says, am I happy? And the second question is, am I marketable? And she's a professional coach. And so she has worked with a lot of employees who former employees, right? People who are no longer hired somewhere, that lost their job in a recession, you know, maybe a pandemic, things like that. And they become surprised to find out they didn't keep themselves marketable. So for example, once I finish this MBA, a big question will be, what am I doing to stay marketable? Some of the things you can do are polish that resume, make that promise to yourself to do it every 6 months, because you are going to forget the projects that you've worked on. But something else that I know I'm going to do specific to my industry is get my SHRM credential. So I have to study for it. And so that's kind of like something I'm thinking about as far as next steps. So on this screen, you're kind of seeing some of the nuggets I've already talked about: developing a good work ethic and habits, that annual check-in. And you can pick like your birthday, or maybe not your birthday. Maybe you're like, I don't want to think about that. I certainly don't pick my birthday. But you can pick, I highly recommend it, just because financial security is important to everyone. And so you want to make sure you're staying marketable, because that's going to help you go a long way, even if you do find yourself out of work. Checking my ego at the door, enormous. Like, I need a shirt that says that. Like, it is something I live by. So obviously, sometimes my ego creeps up on me. I see it a lot in my relationships as well, right? Because at work, it's easier for me to even be more professional and keep that ego checked. But checking your ego at the door is just going to help you listen better. It's going to help you keep an open perspective. I know we lived in a very polarized, or we're living in polarized times where it's very easy for Instagram and all these other algorithms to feed you information that you already believe in. And so what that does is it weakens that muscle that we used to have decades ago, where we were more open to other perspectives. So with checking my ego at the door comes seeking contrarian perspectives, because the minute I stay too much in my head and what I think is right, I know my empathy is going to go down. And if my empathy goes down, specifically in HR, that would make you a less helpful individual, because now you're not going to be able to establish rapport with employees of various backgrounds, and they come to you sometimes very emotional, and you need, I know I need to do my job well. So something else I wrote there is committing to your personal growth, and that could look like developing, like, it doesn't have to be just professional. So I just bought a keyboard. Something I'm into to save money is buying things secondhand. And know that it doesn't have to be just because you can't afford it. Like, I'm not going to talk about my savings or things like that, but I truly think that if you can buy something secondhand, save some money, reduce this thing being produced brand new, like, why not? So there's OfferUp, by the way, if you guys don't know about that, Craigslist. But I've just bought a keyboard because something I want to do to continue developing my cognition is learning something new. So I used to play the piano very little when I was little, and now that I have more confidence, I'm hoping that I'm going to teach myself piece by piece. But it could also look like fitness. That's something that I've started to invest myself. I've started to invest in myself because of a condition that I have, and it's been very helpful. So make sure you're taking care of yourself, not just professionally, but personally. Because what I have found is that if you take care of your home life, your work life, you bring that joy to the workplace. And for example, the reverse is true. If work isn't going so well, unfortunately, it does spill into personal life. And it doesn't have to mean it's your fault. It could mean, you know what, this isn't the culture for you, and you just need to go somewhere else. And I talk about saving and investment habits because they allow a lot of freedom. So for example, if I wanted to go for a job and I had to take a pay cut, I could do that. But what's a trade-off that I've done? I live with my parents, partially. I also sometimes live with my husband, but we're in different cities, so I won't get into that. But yeah, it has helped me. Why? Because I have the best subsidized housing I could ever wish for, right? So sometimes what you want will come with sacrifice, but something I was able to do, for example, is pay for 2 Europe vacations, right? It's not on a credit card because I have this subsidized housing. So I would highly recommend whatever you can do to build good saving and investment habits. I listened to a podcast called Robin Hood Snacks, and that's where it's something I do to listen to what's happening in the market, but I also am subscribed to Wall Street Journal. So I am in the stock, I do dabble into stocks and things like that. I also have like an IRA. So whenever, another advice that I have on the topic of investments is pay attention to your benefits package. If this isn't a tip you already know, and I highly recommend taking advantage of some of that stuff that your employer is offering.
Yeah, definitely great advice on that whole balance work life that many of us sometimes forget to do and end up losing vacation time.
Yeah.
Did you, so thinking about you, so you're in the MBA program right now. How do you feel like you need that in your role? And how did you know when it was the right time to go back to school?
Oh, okay. So I'll start with the question you just asked. How did I know? So at my workplace at the OC Fair and Event Center, I met Alyssa Tyner. She's now De La Hara. And she was going to the MBA program part-time, and she was doing 2 classes a semester. And so when I heard that, it totally broke a stereotype that I had. It challenged my stereotype that to go to a master's program, you have to do it full time. You have to be in a bunch of debt. Like she demystified that completely for me. So for example, because I was financially broke, my first year that I was working at the OC Fair, right? Like I wasn't at a certain threshold. When I applied for the program, I was actually eligible for a couple grants, which is pretty cool. So that was a big blessing, and it really helped soften the financial cost of the program, for example. And because my parents were really supportive, like they're at the time we were even thinking like, oh, if I get in, maybe they won't charge me rent, things like that. But luckily, I got in, I figured out what my package was, and I was like, yeah, I can do this. Because something else that I think is really important is like, we don't always think about it, but there's a lot of steps you can take to test whether or not this is for you. So what I mean by that is that when I did accept, when I accepted, the offer that, yes, I've been admitted to this program, I still wasn't sure it was for me. I wasn't certain. I did everything I could do, though. I went to the workshop that they offered, where you can learn about like statistics. It was Dr. Ingrid Martin hosted it. Yeah, and then I talked to my coworker, and then I had another coworker as well, Janet Garcia, who was in the programs. I also met her at the OC Fair. That's how Alyssa and Janet knew each other. So you kind of start to see how networking happens organically. But yes, so I did everything I could, but I still wasn't certain. And so I remembered that my professor at Cal State Long Beach for the psych program, Dr. Sherry Spann, told us a story where she did a master's program and then she quit after a week or two. I don't recall how long, but that, believe it or not, gave me a lot of peace of mind. I can try this, I can accept the program, I can go to classes, and if I don't like it, I can choose to no longer continue this program. So again, that's another example of me kind of shattering my rigid frame of thinking and realizing, wow, there's really more options here. But then what happened, I loved it. And so that's just a happy ending to the story. But I didn't for sure know I was ready, but I was ready to try, right? By that point, I had been out of school for 2 years, and working at the OC Fair built my professional confidence so much. People were telling me I was doing a good job when I had been telling myself what a kind of loser, right? Like it's like I had so much negative speech in my mind because we're our own worst critics.
That imposter syndrome,
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. That it just it helped my confidence tremendously. So my boss called me to her office one day, and she said, "You're too smart not to do this program." And that really helped me it's like if someone had given me like a cachetada,
Slap
slap
in the
across,
face.
a slap in the face of like, wake up, you can do this. And so yeah, that was kind of the final push I needed in the right direction.
Do you feel that you need the MBA to grow in your industry, in your role at this, or eventually?
Yeah, it's come in handy for a couple of cases, believe it or not. There was one time where I was called into the CEO's office to check a financial thing she was explaining. And because of the class I was in, I was like, wow, we just learned this. And so I think my headphones might be dying. Let me know if I cut off.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was able to speak to that and to help her edit it and things like that. So it has been helpful also because like in HR with the cases, it's not always going to be something you're comfortable with. So I've had to deal with cases involving accounting information. And again, the MBA comes in handy. So it has helped. It's not a requirement, but then there are certain jobs, the higher up you go in HR, to be an excellent business partner, again, if you're interested in HR, you do need to have that business acumen, and that's where I would say the MBA is a great marriage.
So I got a question. What factors encourage you to decide on pursuing an MBA over a master's in human resources?
Yes, so I was concerned that if I did a master's in human resources, I would pigeonhole myself into HR. And so I felt like an MBA was more broad and perhaps would transfer better if I were to pivot again, because I don't know, catch me 15 years from now. I'm not sure. I can't tell you for sure if I'll still be in HR, but I did fall in love with the learning at Cal State Long Beach in the MBA program. And for me, I did interview mentors like, hey, I'm considering going to my alma mater for a master's. Like, do you have advice? Like, what do you think of that? And because I went from the College of Liberal Arts to the College of Business. It's like, for me, going to a new school. If
Right.
you did your undergrad there and you already, if a lot of your professors from your undergrad are going to be the same ones for your master's program, whatever field that is, that's where it might make sense for you to go somewhere else. But it just depends, I also was told that it's not a horrible thing. It's just that going to a place where your professors aren't the same gives you an opportunity to kind of, for sure, just have a new ocean of learning, right?
Right. We're getting a bunch of questions here. What are some skills and qualities you think are necessary to thrive in HR?
Attention to detail, which I covered. I would say being personable as well. I went into the workplace learning from TV because my dad's a trade worker and my mom used to sell gold, and she'd do this in Spanish, right? So I learned my social skills in Spanish. So I went into the workplace using television as far as how to behave. So I was rigid, and I truly, just nothing like what I'm presenting myself to you today. And so I would say, show that human side of you. It helps people connect. And I think building those relationships with employees is really important in HR. And then business acumen is a big one. And I would also say researching, having that drive to double check that answer. So for example, if I wanted to know, this happened the other day. I wanted to know if I could extend a probationary period. Before asking my boss, I'm already looking it up online, finding the government code. And again, we're a state agency, so it's a little different when there's a whole government
versus a
code
private world.
Versus a private world. But in the private world, you might be looking at the Department of Labor. You might be looking, it's there's still laws governing how we have to treat our employees, or what those rules are. So I would say that's a big one. If you develop that habit of double checking it for yourself, or wanting to know as much as you can, that solid source that's going to take you're going to be so valuable. It would be crazy.
Yeah. What is something you know now as a working professional that you wish you knew when you were in college?
Well, certainly that I'm not as dumb as I told myself I was. So if any of you have imposter syndrome, or have certain negative thinking patterns, try to do things that challenge that framework. So, and I'll give you an example in my personal life. I've been working on trying to do a push-up. I'm not there yet, but I told myself since elementary school that I can't do it. And I'm working on shattering that, and I'm getting stronger, and it's teaching me. It's there have been moments where I'm on the floor crying, okay, over this push-up. But do things, whether it's personal or professional, that shatter the floor or the ceiling that you've given yourself.
Glass ceiling, right?
Mm-hmm. So if you told yourself, I can only do X, challenge yourself to prove yourself wrong, that you can do more than you think, because you really can, truly. And with the internet, my goodness, it's limitless. Okay.
With perseverance and effort, you could do anything.
Yes. So to share that, my husband, for example, he's in medical school, and seeing someone do that kind of grind has really taught me, because he's like, the only difference is that I choose to put in the work. There are people out there who might want to do this, but maybe they don't want to put in the work. Everyone sees a successful person and you kind of just think like, oh, maybe it happened overnight, or I want to be that too. But the question I've started to ask myself is like, do I want to put in the work? So there's like, for example, A, I'm not even interested in medicine, but B, hell no, I would not want to put in the work. If I was interested in that field, I would absolutely go to PA school in a heartbeat. So it's okay to decide what level of work are you comfortable with, like finding that balance.
Great. Definitely. Do you have a mentor that has helped you walk through the first few years of your career?
Yeah, I mean, the first mentor that comes to mind is Jacqueline Devlin. So she's the mentor I met at the, I did an internship at the BP oil refinery in Carson. But then also I consider my boss a mentor. So thank you so much for that question, because having a great boss can really change just your career, right? In that moment, in that place. So if you do have a boss that has insecurities, because in my experience, they're out there and they are in positions of power, plan your escape. And that's something I learned from my mentor. That's what she says. So she recommends, for example, that you don't quit, that you make a plan to get out of that toxic environment, if you will, or that environment that's suppressing you, because there could be bosses that are going to be insecure and intimidated by your talent. And you're like, me, little old me. And it's like, yes, you are so gifted, you're so talented, and that could intimidate them. And if that's the kind of boss you're working under, you need to plan your escape for sure.
Definitely. What will HR look like in the future? I did see that the US News World Report like ranked it one of the best business jobs out there. What are your thoughts on that?
Wow, best business jobs. So I will say, because for example, HR was heavily impacted by COVID. So our department does a lot of the everyday protocols that we have in place. And so you had to deal with the pandemic, but then come to work, even though we were working remotely, but come to work with good energy and that good juju to spread, right? That we're all going to be okay and we're going to get through this. So I will say that a caveat to that is that a lot of self-care is required for the discipline that I'm in. And that emotional intelligence that I talked about, you can Google it. There's like HBR, Harvard Business Review articles, and there's also probably podcasts on it. But what I like about HR in terms of thinking of the future is that I don't see us being replaced completely by AI. I see some of our work becoming more efficient, and so you use platforms to get it done quicker. But when it comes to the experience of why you call an HR analyst, or for example, my boss, why the HR director's in the room, I don't think AI can mimic that, because there's just too many factors. The problem solving is fun. It can get frustrating, but I'm into it. The fact that there isn't a clear solution, that it's not, in some textbook. There was a case I worked on for over a year, and there were times that I really had to like put on music or take a quick dancing break to keep myself motivated. But at the end of it, I'm so proud to see things through, if that makes sense, the full loop. And so, yeah, that is something that I think probably is rewarding to a lot of people in HR, is that you get to see like, I was able to help that employee and solve their dispute, or I was able to defend the company in this occasion because truly I know the company did everything right. So things like that,
Right.
yeah, can be rewarding.
Yeah, that humanity, that you still need that person in that place. So I know we're up to our time. But before we go, 2 questions. Can you describe your typical day during this time during COVID? And then any last thoughts you would like to share with our listeners today?
Yeah, during COVID, so sometimes I'm hybrid right now. So sometimes I go in person and then sometimes I work remotely. Typical day is checking emails, not as many phone calls, but used to be. And then as part of those emails is what I talked to you guys about, sure. So I think they email me daily. So I typically, if I don't get to it, I leave it unread. So that's a really important, again, building those habits. It's like, if I get into the habit of deleting it because I don't have time, then I'm going to break my habit. So I'd rather, and so I skim and see any articles that pertain to me. And then I might call my boss about some project that we're working on, like I will do after this. I do a lot of follow through. So like I use Outlook and like the calendar reminders. I use OneNote, which I didn't know as an undergrad, and I so wish I knew. I saw it on people's computers, but I was too shy. Like now, you know,
You could take your notes
27-year-old
there.
me will be like, excuse me, what's that software? That looks great. But when I was 20, I was like, I don't want to look uncool. So I didn't ask. But yeah, I use OneNote a lot, take screenshots and things like that to, if I'm doing something new. Like I recently was taught something that I'd never done before. So I'll take handwritten notes and then transfer them to OneNotes with screen grabs and things like that. But yeah, it's like working on projects. So right now I am working on employee relations, and then later on today, I'll also be working on revamping our supervisor 101 and 102 training, which I love. Training and development is one of the reasons I think I got my job. I don't remember. It's been a while, but it's certainly one of the strengths that my boss has noticed. And so she gives it to me. So it's kind of cool because then I get to work on my strength. I get to work from a place where I really enjoy, you know, I really believe in trainings. I love trainings. There are people who are like, oh, training. No, I'm the opposite. So yeah.
Love training. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your expertise with our listeners today. If
Yeah.
wants to reach out to you, are you on LinkedIn where they could, you know, connect with you, and then maybe they could connect with us to
I am on LinkedIn, and they can certainly connect with me, but I just typed my personal email. Let me see if I can pull up my LinkedIn page. How would I do that? How would I share my
we'll just
LinkedIn?
have them search for your name on LinkedIn.
Oh, okay. Then
Okay,
yeah, you
and
should just look
they'll
up.
befriend you.
Yeah, so it's just Xiomara Hernandez, and you should be able to find me. And then feel free to reach out. I love helping. And then the like parting words of advice would be just like AIR, which is also from my mentor. It's advice, information, or referrals. So any place you are in life, whether you're super tenured and you're just looking for your next promotion, or you're just starting off, or you're looking to pivot, a great way to try to get information is to ask someone, hey, for example, I'm looking to become a paralegal. Do you know of anyone I could talk to ask for advice, information, or referral? And that's a big part of what I did when I decided I wanted to try HR. I did speak probably to 2 or 3 different people, and I called up people I knew saying, hey, do you know anyone in this field that I could talk to? And that way, when you clarify that it's for advice, information, and referral, it makes it clear that you're not going in there saying, hey, can you give me a job? Because nobody wants to take that call.
No.
So yeah, I would say that's my parting advice. And I hope if I said anything that was like offensive or anything, I'm so sorry. I get so excited sometimes when I talk that I might assume, oh, you haven't heard this. But if you have, then I'm just repeating it. But thanks so much for trying to learn from my experience. I'm honored.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. I want to thank all of our listeners for joining us today, and I encourage you to follow us on our website or on social media and learn about our future chats like this. We thank you for your time.
It says, can I share my email address? And it looks like I sent it just to the panelists. Am I able to message everyone?
You
Maybe
should, but there
panelists and
we
attendees.
could oh here. No, you put it to everyone. We'll put it up to everyone. But if anyone wants for your email, just contact us and we're happy to share.
Yeah, yeah.